Republicans moments ago putting forth their own infrastructure proposal, but it's been 4 months since President Biden took office, and many of the Democrats' biggest priorities have been stalled in the Senate.
In fact, now Majority Leader Chuck Schumer saying this: "We always hope that our Republican friends will work with us on things. We hope to move forward with Republicans, but we're not going to let them saying no stand in our way."
All right, we'll bring in now our panelist, Rich Valdez, host of This Is America podcast and a former advisor to President Trump's National Diversity Coalition. Mark Halperin, political analyst, is joining us as well. Aaron Elmore standing by, Republican strategist and executive director of USA Strong. Good to see everyone here. Aaron, I'll go to you first on this. The big bill now is a two-part infrastructure package. Part one costing nearly $2 trillion. And when Schumer says they're not going to let the GOP stand in their way, does he mean they're going to compromise on the price tag, or are they threatening reconciliation? How do you read it?
Well, it's a scary proposition either way. And what comes to mind is a lack of integrity here. These Democrats are pushing infrastructure, when all that is air quotes infrastructure, because we know that very little of this bill is going to fix our roads, our bridges, the things of that nature. So really, we want to know, and the American people deserve to know, exactly how they intend to spend this money, correct? And the American people see infrastructure, they think this is a good idea, but what they have to realize, this is a far left agenda that they're jamming down the throats of the American citizen who are far more moderate. So I think we are headed towards that reconciliation, and this is not certainly the unity that Joe Biden was talking about when he got elected, now is it?
Well, taking a closer look at what the Republicans just proposed, again, the majority of the nearly $1 trillion going towards traditional infrastructure, roads, bridges, other major projects. We've got public transit systems taking a good amount, passenger and freight rail, as well as airports, water infrastructure, and broadband. There are several others in there as well. But it does make you wonder, now that the Republicans have put forth their proposal, how much Democrats would be willing to entertain it. In fact, the deputy press secretary was asked that question yesterday. Here's what she had to say.
We understand that this is a town that hasn't seen a whole lot of bipartisanship over the last few years, last 4 years to be exact. But this president is committed to trying to end that.
And yet, Mark Halperin, during the president's term in office, we haven't seen bipartisanship. So do we think we could see it now?
It's a pretty big moment, Emma. The Republicans, as you said, just put out their counter offer, about $1 trillion in spending. Obviously, there's still a challenge of getting agreement on how to pay for it, but they're still pretty far apart on what to spend it on. I think the ball's now in the White House's court, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do. They don't want to be the first to walk away from the table. So how can the president keep the talks going? He'll have to come down in his overall spending again. And if he does that, I think liberals will scream, and that may be the end of the negotiations. But the ball in the White House court again, and they face a very interesting and difficult choice. If they want to be bipartisan, they're going to have to be bipartisan.
Rich Valdez, your thoughts on what you're seeing out here, too? And I know this is a different topic, but it seems like overnight we can send humanitarian aid over there to the Palestinians. But getting infrastructure here in the United States of America, I mean, this could play out for a while.
Well, I mean, this is exactly the semantics of it all. They're saying, oh, we're trying to work with our Republican colleagues. Come on, Chuck Schumer. Who do you think you're kidding? When I was a little kid living in Brooklyn, Chuck Schumer used to come by and mess up my hair when I rode my bike. He was a man of the people about town. But he's in Washington. Let me tell you, this guy hasn't been more full of crap ever. I mean, it's remarkable for him to say we're trying to work with the Republicans. It's clearly this is what you're going to do. And if you don't do it, we're going to ram reconciliation down your throat if we can get it.
Yeah, talk about something that we could potentially see bipartisan support for, Aaron. My mind goes to the investigation into the origins of COVID. Could that be a commission that would pique interest of both Democrats and Republicans?
Well, let's look at the politics. Unfortunately, everything these days is highly political. The reason why you didn't hear this narrative when President Trump was in office, because they wanted to keep the heat on the president and not have China show any sort of culpability or accountability. Now that we have Joe Biden, they want all eyes off of the White House, all eyes off of America. Let's shift the blame and shift the focus. We knew this all along, and unfortunately, we were called conspiracy theorists and tinfoil hat crazies. And now look, we were right. I don't like the narrative that they're saying we're just going to let the World Health Organization sort of rule rule the roost and control the conversation, because they are the exact agency who just took China on their word when the coronavirus pandemic broke out and cost us millions of lives, I'm sure. So I think that there should be an investigation. I think we should see more transparency. I think the Facebooks of the world should be letting up on posting about these things. But honestly, it just shows you how dishonest Democrats are, and that the liberal media is in the can for Democrats. And hopefully some people are waking up to the realities of the situation.
Mark, Democrats are also trying to revive that idea of the public health option. Health committee chairs, they sent letters out. This was yesterday, asking healthcare experts for input on legislation they plan to draft. Could a public option gain traction? Do you see that as a possibility?
It's something the president has rejected, and for all the press coverage highlighting divisions within the Republican Party, which definitely exist, there are some pretty big differences in the Democratic Party, not just on health care and the public option, but on how to proceed on the minimum wage, on voting rights, et cetera. So I don't think Joe Biden is going to move any further to the left than he already has, and that would rule out his support for public option. But you see a lot of very influential congressional members, the Democratic Party in the House and the Senate, who are going to continue to push it.
And yet, Rich Valdez, we have seen the president who described himself as a moderate on the campaign trail really go forward with some left-leaning policies. Do you think that members of his own party would be able to impact him and influence him when it comes to these decisions?
I think it's clear as day that the president can be swayed by the more left-leaning members of the party, whether it's his recent reaction to his conversation with Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and other situations. I think AOC and that crew, the squad, the all-out crazies that are out in Congress, they can put pressure on him. And I think he's really focused on trying to be a good guy, trying to have a win for himself, because I think he plans on only having one term. With that being said, I think, yeah, he's very malleable, and I think they've alluded to it, and he's admitted to it.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Rich Valdez, Mark Halperin, Aaron Elmore, our political panelists for this hour. Thank you all so much. We appreciate it.
All right, coming up on National Report, the Biden administration announcing a new investigation into the origins of the coronavirus. The news coming just hours after CNN reported that President Biden's own State Department shut down a similar investigation earlier this year. So what changed? Plus,
you gave them money and you said, don't do gain-of-function research.
Correct.
And they said, we won't.
Correct.
And you have no way of knowing whether they did or not, except you trust them. Is that right?
Well, we generally always trust the grantee to do what they say.
Dr. Anthony Fauci getting grilled on the Hill, facing tough questions about his role in the coronavirus pandemic, as well as the NIH. A growing number of Republicans now calling on Fauci to resign or be fired.
Plus, Republican senators officially presenting their $1 trillion infrastructure counteroffer. That's today, but there is already indication the White House is planning on rejecting that offer and going at it alone again. Is there any unity in that? We discuss. All right, good Thursday morning to you. Welcome to National Report. We're glad you're stopping by. I'm Sean Kreisman.
I'm Emma Reckenberg. Thanks for joining us today. The White House announcing a new plan to investigate the origins of coronavirus. But the move is being met with a lot of skepticism because it comes just hours after CNN published a report claiming Biden's own State Department ended a similar investigation launched under the Trump administration.
Yeah, President Biden also giving the intelligence now another day, 90 days rather, to go back and look at how this pandemic really started. But many are wondering why it's taken until right now for the president to even come to this point.
Newsmax White House correspondent Emerald Robinson has been tracking all of this. She joins us now live from the White House. Emerald, what is the Biden administration saying now about their own investigation?
Emma, the details are a little bit murky. It comes hours after that CNN breaking news about Biden shutting down the Trump-initiated investigation led by the State Department. It also comes after days of Press Secretary Jen Psaki deferring to the World Health Organization, indicating that the Biden administration was counting on them to conduct another quote unquote independent investigation. Now, this particular investigation, the new one that they just announced yesterday, the 90-day, will be led out of the National Security Council here at the White House and will involve different agencies in the intelligence community and what they're calling an all of government approach. And you know, the new investigation was announced yesterday by the deputy press secretary during the briefing.
Today, the president asked the intelligence community to redouble their efforts to collect and analyze information that could bring us closer to a definitive conclusion and to a report back to him in 90 days.
So, Karine Jean-Pierre saying that the president received a report in March and that he has now decided all of a sudden, out of nowhere, essentially that they need another 90 days. She was also, if you'll note, very late to that press briefing yesterday. They pushed this time 3 different times, clearly still trying to get their messaging together on this. And there was also messaging out of the State Department yesterday when spokesman Ned Price was asked about this clear about face. Ned Price trying to defend the Biden's closure of that original State Department investigation into the lab leak origins. Price suggesting that it wasn't a termination of it at all, that it had come to a natural end and that there was a report generated, but he received a lot of pushback on that. Clearly the media was caught off guard by this. Usually they're not so caught off guard, but this was such a shocking about face from what the administration has been saying that it caught many by surprise. Now, despite what Ned Price is saying from the State Department, a former State Department employee under the Trump administration who also was a contractor working on this particular investigation that got closed, is contradicting what Ned Price in the State Department is trying to say. He's saying that his department colleagues were deliberately downplaying the possible links to China's biological weapons program. The State Department suggesting that they didn't proceed with the investigation in the Biden administration because of methodology and concerns about quality. But what I will tell you, after that bipartisan support for Rand Paul and Joni Ernst amendment addressing the Wuhan Lab and gain of function research just a couple days ago, it received bipartisan support. This White House is facing more and more pressure to address the possible lab leak origins and to hold China accountable. But Jean-Pierre would not commit to any questions or any possible accountability measures that the president might take.
I know she had mentioned that she would just wait until the end of the 90 days. Of course, it does make you wonder how much evidence or information would even be left after 90 days. Emerald Robinson live at the White House for us. Emerald, thank you.
Here to react now, Pennsylvania Congressman Guy Reschenthaler, who recently uncovered that more than $1 million of taxpayer money approved under the Obama administration was funneled to China's controversial Wuhan Lab. Is that correct, Congressman?
Sean, it absolutely is. And please, as always, just call me Guy. But yes, early on, I wrote a letter to the DOD, Department of Homeland Security, USAID, elsewhere, and we just uncovered about a week ago that USAID sent $1.1 million to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Now, they did it through EcoHealth Alliance, which is based in New York City, but they knew full well this was going to gain of function research, and I can explain that. Further, we know that NIH sent at least $600,000 to EcoHealth Alliance to send to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Now, I had a letter written in June, even May of last year to the DOD. They just now got back to me saying that they'll give me the number, the dollar amount that they sent to EcoHealth Alliance and Wuhan Institute of Virology sometime in June. Department of Homeland Security still hasn't gotten back to me. But isn't it interesting that a year ago, more than a year ago, Tom Cotton, myself, others were saying that this virus likely came from a lab in Wuhan that coincidentally was run by a general that was studying biological weapons of mass destruction, actually the head general of the PLA for biological weapons of mass destruction, that there was a scientist there known as the Bat Lady that was studying zoonotic bat-borne diseases, that she was conducting gain-of-function research. It's weird that Tom Cotton and I and others were pointing to this as a legit hypothesis and theory, but we were called conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theorists. The real conspiracy theory was that this virus originated in nature and came from a bat 1,000 miles away from Wuhan.
The president, and by the way, I hope that you share that information as soon as the DOD gets back to you, and I know that you will. The president's saying he is asking to redouble the efforts on this investigation to have results within 90 days. Why do you think that's launched now? Why wasn't this one of the first tasks put out there?
Well, let me just color me skeptical, and here's why. We had in the omnibus spending package an amendment, and Republicans, particularly Republicans on the China Task Force, of which where I sit on the China Task Force, we fought hard to compel the executive branch to do a study and to release unclassified information on that. I think 60 some days has already passed. So that 90 days is really, you can look at it as an extension on the mandate that we in Congress already put on the administration, number one. Number two, why is Biden behind this now? Well, I think it's a political move. Why is that? It's because the White House is now controlled by Democrats. They're notoriously soft on China. They can control this narrative. Had the Trump administration been given the chance to look into this, and had Biden allowed the Trump investigation to go forward, they wouldn't have any control. So it could make the Chinese Communist Party look bad. Additionally, it would make unelected career bureaucrats like Dr. Fauci look bad as well, because they knew they were sending millions of taxpayer dollars to EcoHealth Alliance that went to Wuhan Institute of Virology to study gain-of-function research, and likely this leaked from a lab in Wuhan.
Not a lot of questions, though, about EcoHealth Alliance. A lot of American people want to know, okay, well, you're giving money to that. What is it? Why are you doing that? It seems like a middleman. Yeah. Do you know why they would send money there?
Yes, here's why. Because the Obama administration put a moratorium on gain-of-function research in the United States. So for Dr. Fauci to do gain-of-function research and to fund it, he had to fund EcoHealth Alliance that was led by Peter Daszak. Peter Daszak then sent the money to the Wuhan Institute of Virology to do the gain-of-function research in Wuhan, not in the United States. They know this. We have them dead to rights on it. Dr. Fauci, in fact, wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post talking about gain-of-function research. He said it was, quote unquote, a risk worth taking. Wonder if he thinks it's a risk worth taking now, after the staggering death count because of this virus. So we know that. Also, there were papers published thanking Dr. Fauci for funding the gain-of-function research. They knew full well what was going on. They gaslit the American public. Finally, the media is holding them to account.
I'm out of time. There's so many things I want to talk to you about. I'm out of time, though. But before I do, I'll let you go. We're days away from Memorial Day. I know that you served. We're hearing a lot about what's going on inside of the military right now. Is so much happening. What's your thoughts on this as we approach this year's Memorial Day?
Well, first off, prayers and thanks go to all the fallen from all the wars, everybody that gave the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom and liberty. I am worried, though, about today's military. Today's military has gone woke. The officer ranks, especially the top brass, has been kowtowing to the far left liberals in the Biden administration. I personally saw this when I served under the Obama administration military. Our military is there to defend our liberty, our freedom. It's to be a fighting force. We're not here to be a woke liberal machine. Unfortunately, the Biden administration, just like the Obama administration, is putting wokeness above military readiness. That should worry us all.
Well, guys, good to see you as always. I appreciate you stopping by again. Thank you for your service as always, and we'll see you real soon, Congressman.
Thanks, Sean. Take care.
All right, still ahead. Welcome back. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office has convened a grand jury that is expected to weigh any criminal evidence against former President Trump, the Trump Organization, and top executives of his company. But the former president says this is all purely political. Joining us now to discuss, former Lieutenant Governor of New York, Betsy McCoy. She's also a New York Post columnist. Betsy, thanks as always for joining us here. Now, the Washington Post is reporting that the Manhattan DA is looking into financial misconduct, including criminal fraud in the Trump investigation. What are your thoughts on this story?
Well, first of all, it is shameful and illegal for the district attorney to announce or leak information about the focus of a grand jury investigation, because you can ruin somebody's reputation, cost them their jobs, and it turns out that there's nothing against them, that there's no reason to charge them with any crime. So A grand jury investigation should never become a public issue until there are charging documents, when the grand jury is actually voted to indict. That's number one. And this is a very typical New York abuse. You see it with Cyrus Vance. You see it with the Attorney General of New York State, Letitia James. We have seen this over and over again, from Eliot Spitzer to Andrew Cuomo, and now to these two clowns. They're all using their legal position to advance their own political future. Vance has already announced he's not going to run for DA again. He may have his eye on running for governor on the Democratic ticket. We know Letitia James is the aspiring governor. So all of this focus, which is totally illegal, is exploiting New York law enforcement for personal political gain. Let me also say this. They ought to be particularly ashamed, because crime in New York City particularly, has soared so much that that city is now unlivable. Cyrus Vance should be focusing on stopping crime in New York, not pursuing a former president.
Well, there have yet to be indictments, so we'll continue to follow the story. But another story that we are following is something that the AG is involved with. Again, investigating the wrongdoings of the current governor of the state, that being Andrew Cuomo. Have there been any developments in regards to the nursing home scandal, or sexual harassment scandal, or book deal scandal? I mean, the list goes on and on.
That's right. And Cuomo is under a lot of heat, not simply from Letitia James, but more importantly from the federal investigators, because even though the accusations of sexual harassment, sexual misconduct make the big headlines, including in my newspaper, the fact is that the most serious accusations against Cuomo that could result in actual criminal charges are for mail-in wire fraud. In ordinary lingo, that means he lied. He lied to federal investigators, state investigators, and the public about the number of nursing home deaths. And that's where he's facing the biggest problem.
And of course, looking ahead to the election in New York State as well, have we seen any signs that perhaps he might not pursue the governorship during the next election?
It's hard to say at this point. He's posing as invulnerable. But that's what good politicians do right till the end when they fall. So we'll see what happens with Andrew Cuomo.
Okay, we will. Betsy McCoy joining us here live on National Report. Betsy, always great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, coming up, Florida. All right, remember when the media called Florida Governor Ron DeSantis crazy for keeping schools open during the pandemic and other things?
Well, here is how he reacted to more criticism of how he handled the pandemic. Take a look at this.
I didn't see that, and a lot of people feel that way about the masks, and he's not wrong. Look, like, we live in New York, and I can tell you that still goes on, way more than you think. Face shields, gloves. I legit yesterday I saw a man. He has gloves on. Didn't get the memo for the CDC, face shield, the mask. I imagine this person would be vaccinated if you are that fearful of this virus. And it just goes to show you that we live, man, state by state. It's just different worlds right now.
So true. No, we were talking maybe last week about how we greet people. Mm-hmm. And in New York, you might be a little more hesitant to reach out for that handshake. Yeah. A viewer commented on Twitter just saying, we've been hugging people for months. You know, what are you talking about? Yeah. What state are you living in? So it just makes a difference. Of course, you know, if you want to wear a mask, if you want to continue wearing a mask, by all means, go for it. I don't think anyone's going to shame you for doing that, as no one should be shamed for their own personal decisions that they make. However, the soundbite that I go back to is when DeSantis had previously said, if you get the vaccine, you're immune. Act like it.
Right. Yeah. Great point. And that's what the messaging, again, goes back to the messaging. It's off because if you've been vaccinated, according to the CDC, you're fine. So why would you worry about those that are unvaccinated? You got the vaccine, walk around like you're vaccinated. Yeah. Tout how strong these vaccines are. The efficacy rate of 90% plus. I mean, that's amazing stuff. And if all this is true, then act like how strong it is. And that's what they've done, obviously, in Florida and Texas. But I can assure you, New York, it's not the same.
We got to call up our Florida bureau, see what they're up to. Maybe we could pay them a visit. That could be kind of fun. Yeah. All right. In the meantime, though, we're here still in New York City.
Louisiana Senator John Kennedy, grilling Dr. Anthony Fauci about money used to fund that research lab at China's controversial lab there in Wuhan. It's coming amid disturbing allegations of a possible cover-up by some officials since the start of the pandemic. Justin Goodman is the Vice President of Advocacy and Public Policy at the White Coat Waste Project. He's been following this story since the very beginning. Justin, thanks so much for coming on here. In your findings, what was surprising to you? Did you find out if taxpayer money could have gone to the Wuhan lab and it was used to fund gain-of-function research that allegedly caused this pandemic?
So here's what we know. Back in April of 2020, our organization exposed that taxpayer dollars definitively were used by the Wuhan Institute of Virology for experiments that involved manipulating coronaviruses. There's a $3.7 million grant that was given to a U.S. nonprofit called EcoHealth Alliance. And that money, part of that money, was funneled to the Wuhan Institute for these dangerous coronavirus experiments that now experts believe, from the Biden administration to the Trump administration and beyond, likely caused the pandemic.
We just had Congressman Guy Reschenthaler to back up your claim that you're making right now, saying that a week ago he found $1.1 million was funneled into EcoHealth Alliance there. And he's pressing for more answers on that. And again, the president, the new information here, the president ordering this investigation to double down on it, to have this investigation done within 90 days. But again, this wasn't done at the beginning. Now you have Senator Rubio questioning Fauci about why he initially dismissed this lab leak theory. Here's that.
Why did you dismiss the lab leak theory as credible?
I have always said that the high likelihood is that this is a natural occurrence. I didn't dismiss anything. I just said it's a high likelihood that this is a natural occurrence from the environment of an animal reservoir that we have not yet identified. Well, and I still maintain that. But as I just mentioned in response to other questions, that since you don't know 100% about that, because no one knows, including me, 100%, what the origin is the reason why we're in favor of further investigation.
Justin, if you don't know 100%, wouldn't you leave all possibilities on the table?
Absolutely. The lab leak hypothesis is Anthony Fauci's inconvenient truth. We know that he directed funds to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The NIH was aware that this lab was doing experiments that involved going into the mines in southern China, capturing coronavirus-infected bats, bringing them back to the laboratory, and then manipulating coronaviruses so they were more infectious to animals and to human cells. And that's the crux of the lab leak hypothesis. If that is the reason that the pandemic began, then the U.S. government and the NIH in particular are culpable for that.
The White House still, again, falling back on the WHO, falling back on the findings of China, they're still saying they are committing to working with the World Health Organization. Listen to this sound.
We've talked about making sure that we are getting the data, right, from China, right, making sure that we're getting more information so we can, it's hard to prejudge these things, right? It's hard to make pronouncements of something when you don't have all the information that you need. So this is going to take some time. This is going to continue to work with the WHO as well. These are not mutually exclusive. These are happening at the same time. So it's going to take more collaboration and more conversations as well.
Which also begs the question, how much confidence does the United States have in the WHO?
We shouldn't have much. I mean, the WHO's so-called investigation into the coronavirus origins to date has been plagued by conflicts of interest and interference by the CCP, and a dismissal, a basic dismissal of the lab leak hypothesis, when virtually all of the circumstantial evidence that exists out in the world right now points to the lab as the cause of the pandemic. So we should have no faith in the WHO at all. The Biden administration's about face seems to be an attempt to save face for shutting down the Trump administration's investigation, the investigation that started under the Trump administration into the lab leak hypothesis, which really compiled some of the most compelling evidence in favor of the lab leak, including that workers at the Wuhan Institute were sick in fall 2019 with symptoms consistent with COVID, that the Chinese government, the communist government, has interfered with investigations, that the lab had coronaviruses in its library that were 96% similar to the one that caused the pandemic, and the list goes on. So while it's a welcome development that they're calling for an investigation to see what intelligence the U.S. has, hopefully it's not too little too late.
All right, Justin Goodman joining us live again with his findings and weighing in on this topic. Very timely. Justin, thanks so much. We appreciate that.
Thanks for having me.